A queen consort told her emperor husband that a purple burial shroud was finer than flight, saving his throne when he wanted to flee a massive riot. A mother ruling France for her young son personally led knights on campaign and coolly negotiated with the Pope himself. One powerful Italian countess owned so much land and commanded so many soldiers that she practically decided who got to be Pope. The marriage of one teenage duchess to a king and then another didn't just create royal babies, it redrew the map of Western Europe and fueled wars for generations. Number 6. The ultimate insiders, whispering wisdom and warnings to power. You might think medieval politics was all about men in armor, clashing swords, or robed figures making grand pronouncements. But often, the most critical political moves happened far from the battlefield or the council chamber, in the quiet conversations between powerful men and the women closest to them. Wives, mothers, and mistresses could become indispensable advisors, their insights and warnings shaping decisions that affected entire kingdoms. They didn't hold official titles as chief strategist, but their influence was woven into the fabric of rule. Take Empress Theodora, for instance. She wasn't born into a palace. Her early life was in the rough and tumble world of the Byzantine circus. But she caught the eye of Justinian, heir to the throne of the Eastern Roman Empire. He changed the law so he could marry her, and when he became emperor in 527 AD, Theodora became his empress. Many in the stuffy Constantinopolitan court looked down on her. They underestimated. In 532 AD, Constantinople exploded in the Nika riots. Rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, united against Justinian's heavy taxes and autocratic style. For days, the city burned. Large parts of Constantinople, including the original Hagia Sophia, were destroyed. Justinian's key ministers were targeted, and a new emperor was even proclaimed by the mobs. Justinian's generals were struggling to contain the chaos. The situation looked so hopeless that Justinian and his closest advisors were ready to pack up the imperial treasure and flee the city by sea. Their ships were waiting. It was Theodora who reportedly turned the tide in the imperial council. Accounts from the historian Procopius, who was there, describe her speaking up when all the men had fallen silent or were advising retreat. She is said to have declared that she would not flee. She argued that even if flight guaranteed safety, she preferred to stay. She stated that royalty was a fine burial shroud, or that purple makes a fine winding sheet, meaning it was better to die a ruler than live as an exile. She reminded Justinian of the power they held and the shame of abandoning it. Her words supposedly shamed and re-energized Justinian and his generals. Instead of fleeing, they planned a counterattack. General Belisarius and Mundus trapped the rioters in the Hippodrome and slaughtered tens of thousands. The revolt was crushed. Justinian's reign was saved, and he went on to rule for nearly 40 more years, overseeing a period of immense legal reform, the Corpus Juris Civilis, and reconquest. Theodora remained his most trusted confidant and co-ruler in many aspects, influencing laws related to women's rights, such as prohibiting forced prostitution and expanding property rights for women. Centuries earlier in Frankish Gaul, another woman's influence had profound political consequences through her relationship with a king. Clotilde was a Burgundian princess, born around 474 AD. She was also a devout Chalcedonian Christian, unlike many of the Germanic rulers of the time, including the Frankish king Clovis I, who was a pagan. They married around 493 AD. Clotilde persistently encouraged her husband to convert to her faith. Clovis was hesitant. He saw the Christian God as perhaps less useful in battle than his own gods. Clotilde had their first son baptized, but the child died shortly afterward. Clovis reportedly blamed the Christian God. When their second son was baptized, he too fell ill, but according to Gregory of Tours, Clotilde prayed, and the child recovered. These personal events played a role, but the political landscape was also a factor. Many of Clovis's Gallo-Roman subjects were Chalcedonian Christians. Converting could help him consolidate his rule over them. The traditional story, again from Gregory of Tours, tells of a critical moment during a fierce battle against the Alemanni around 496 AD or 506 AD. The Franks were on the verge of defeat. Clovis, in desperation, prayed to Clotilde's God, promising to be baptized if he won. The tide of battle turned, the Franks were victorious, and the Alemannic king was killed. True to his word, and continually encouraged by Clotilde and counseled by Bishop Remigius of Reims, whom Clotilde had likely introduced to him or at least facilitated access, Clovis was baptized on Christmas Day, likely in 496, 498, or 508 AD, along with thousands of his warriors. This conversion was a pivotal moment in European history. It aligned the Franks with the Gallo-Roman population and the powerful church centered in Rome, rather than with Arian Christianity, which was considered heretical by the Roman Church and was prevalent among other Germanic tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals. This gave Clovis a powerful ideological tool for expansion and legitimacy. His new faith provided a justification for his wars against Arian rulers. It also laid the foundation for the strong alliance between the Frankish monarchy and later French kings and the papacy, shaping the political and religious map of Western Europe for centuries. Clotilde's persistent faith and her counsel to her husband were instrumental in this far-reaching political shift. After Clovis's death, she retired to a religious life, but continued to be involved in the tumultuous politics of her sons' reigns, often trying to mediate their bloody conflicts. Number 5. Stepping up when kings fall or are too small. The power of the regent. What happened when a king died, leaving a child as heir, or if a king was captured, or simply mentally incapable of ruling? In these power vacuums, medieval women often stepped into the breach, ruling as regents for their sons or husbands. These weren't just caretaker roles. Many female regents wielded enormous power, making laws, commanding armies, and navigating treacherous political landscapes. They had to be shrewd, resilient, and sometimes ruthless to protect their family's legacy and the stability of the realm. Blanche of Castile is a standout example. Born a princess of Castile in 1188, she married Prince Louis of France, who later became King Louis VIII. When Louis VIII died suddenly in 1226, their son, Louis IX, later St. Louis, was only 12 years old. Blanche was named regent. This was a perilous time. Powerful French barons, resentful of growing royal authority, saw a child king and a foreign-born female regent as an opportunity to reclaim their own power and privileges. they formed coalitions and rebelled. Blanche, however, was more than a match for them. She acted with incredible speed and determination. She had Louis IX swiftly crowned at Reims to solidify his legitimacy. She then personally led military expeditions, sometimes with the young king beside her, to confront the rebellious nobles. There are accounts of her riding with her knights, enduring harsh winter conditions and facing down armed opponents. She skillfully played the barons against each other, using diplomacy where possible and force where necessary. She also had to contend with interference from England and navigate complex relationships with the papacy. One of her major challenges was Count Peter Mauclair of Brittany and Philip Hurepel, Count of Boulogne, Louis VIII's illegitimate half-brother. They, along with other nobles like Hugh X of Lusignan, repeatedly rose against her. Blanche managed to detach some from the coalitions through treaties and shows of strength. For instance, the Treaty of Vendôme in 1227 helped to break one such league. She also faced down a rebellion in Brittany with a significant military campaign in 1230. She was not just a warrior queen. She was also a skilled administrator, ensuring the royal finances remained stable and justice was administered. She carefully oversaw Louis IX's education, instilling in him a strong sense of piety and justice that would define his later reign. Even after Louis IX came of age in 1234, Blanche remained his most trusted advisor. When he went on crusade from 1248 to 1252, he left Blanche as regent of France once more, a testament to his complete faith in her abilities. She governed effectively again, even in her advanced years, dealing with issues like the Shepherd's Crusade. Her regency was crucial in centralizing royal power in France and laying the groundwork for her son's celebrated reign. Across the English Channel, a few decades later, Isabella of France, daughter of King Philip IV of France, found herself in a very different but equally influential position. She married King Edward II of England in 1308. Their marriage was meant to ease tensions between England and France, but it became deeply troubled. Edward II notoriously favored male companions, like Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger, showering them with lands and titles and alienating his queen and many powerful nobles. Isabella endured years of humiliation and political marginalization. The situation came to a head when Isabella was sent to France in 1325 to negotiate a treaty with her brother, King Charles IV of France, concerning English territories in Gascony. Once there, she refused to return to England as long as the Despensers remained in power. She became the focal point for English exiles who opposed Edward II. Crucially, she formed an alliance and a romantic relationship with Roger Mortimer, a powerful marcher lord who had escaped from the Tower of London. Together, they plotted an invasion. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer landed in England with a small mercenary army. They were quickly joined by many English nobles disaffected with Edward II's rule. Edward's support crumbled. The Despensers were captured and brutally executed. Edward II himself was captured and forced to abdicate in January 1327 in favor of his and Isabella's young son, Edward III. Isabella then ruled as regent for her son, with Mortimer as her chief advisor and effectively co-ruler. While her initial actions to depose her husband were direct and revolutionary, her subsequent period as regent for the young Edward III saw her wielding significant political power indirectly through his authority. During their roughly 3-year rule, they ended a costly war with Scotland, Treaty of Northampton, 1328, which recognized Robert the Bruce as king, which was unpopular with some English nobles. Mortimer accumulated vast wealth and power, leading to resentment. In 1330, the young Edward III, now 18, asserted his own authority in a coup. Mortimer was arrested, tried, and executed. Isabella was removed from power, though she was treated with respect and lived comfortably for the rest of her life, often visited by her son. Her regency, born from a dramatic seizure of power, jocosed how a queen could take control in a crisis, even if her methods were controversial and her grip on power ultimately temporary. Her actions directly led to the end of one king's reign and the beginning of another's. Number 4. Tying the knot for thrones and territory, marriage as a political super-tool. In the medieval world, a royal or noble marriage was rarely just about love. It was a high-stakes political, economic, and strategic maneuver. Women, often as young teenagers, were key pieces in these dynastic games. Their marriages could forge powerful alliances between kingdoms, end bitter wars, secure volatile borders, or conversely, lay the groundwork for future conflicts over succession and territory. The children born from these unions were equally important, as they represented the continuation of a dynasty and the potential for further strategic marriages. Eleanor of Aquitaine is perhaps the most famous example of a woman whose marriages dramatically shaped the political map of Europe. Born around 1122, she inherited the vast duchy of Aquitaine in southwestern France at the age of about 15, making her the most eligible heiress in Europe. Her lands were larger and richer than those directly controlled by the King of France. In 1137, she married Prince Louis, who became King Louis VII of France just weeks later. This marriage brought Aquitaine under the French crown's influence, a massive territorial gain for the Capetian dynasty. Eleanor was a spirited and intelligent queen. She even accompanied Louis VII on the Second Crusade, an unusual step for a queen taking along her own Aquitanian vassals. However, the marriage was not a happy one. They had 2 daughters, but no sons, which was a major concern for the succession of the French throne. Temperamentally, they clashed. Eleanor was reportedly frustrated by Louis's piety and indecisiveness. After 15 years, the marriage was annulled in 1152, officially on the grounds of consanguinity. They were too closely related. The political consequence was immediate. Aquitaine was no longer tied to the French crown through Eleanor. Just 8 weeks after the annulment, Eleanor made an even more politically explosive move. She married Henry, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was a major rival to Louis VII. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King, Henry II of England. Eleanor was now Queen of England. Her vast continental territories of Aquitaine and Poitou, combined with Henry's Normandy, Anjou, and England, created the sprawling Angevin Empire. This empire stretched from the borders of Scotland to the Pyrenees, dwarfing the lands directly controlled by the King of France. The shift in the balance of power, largely facilitated by Eleanor's two marriages, set the stage for centuries of rivalry and warfare between England and France. Eleanor had 8 children with Henry, including future kings Richard I, the Lionheart, and John. She was actively involved in governing Aquitaine, sometimes on Henry's behalf, sometimes in her own right, and later played a crucial role during Richard's reign, governing England while he was on crusade and helping to raise his ransom when he was captured. Her life demonstrates how a woman's marital choices, even if the first was arranged for her, and her control over inherited lands could fundamentally alter international power dynamics. Another significant marriage alliance was that of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. In the mid-15th century, the Iberian Peninsula was divided into several Christian kingdoms: Castile, Aragon, Portugal, Navarre, and the Muslim Emirates of Granada in the south. Isabella became heiress to the throne of Castile, the largest and most populous of these kingdoms. Ferdinand was heir to the throne of Aragon, a maritime power with territories across the Mediterranean. Their marriage in 1469 was highly political and initially controversial, even undertaken without full papal approval, which was later secured. When Isabella ascended to the Castilian throne in 1474, after a war of succession, and Ferdinand to the Aragonese throne in 1479, their personal union brought their two powerful kingdoms into a close alliance. While Castile and Aragon remained legally distinct entities with their own laws, institutions, and customs, Isabella and Ferdinand governed jointly, famously under the motto Tanto Monta, Monta Tanto, Isabel como Fernando. This union of the Catholic monarchs, as they became known, was a pivotal step towards the creation of a unified Spain. Together, they pursued policies that centralized power, reformed the administration, and completed the Reconquista, the centuries-long effort to reclaim Iberian territory from Muslim rule. In 1492, they conquered Granada, the last Muslim stronghold. That same year, they also famously sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage, which led to the European discovery of the Americas, and issued the Alhambra Decree ordering the expulsion or conversion of Jews from their kingdoms. These actions had profound and lasting consequences for Spain and the world. The marriage of Isabella and Ferdinand was the bedrock upon which modern Spain was built. Their daughters were also strategically married into other royal houses: Catherine of Aragon to Arthur, Prince of Wales, and then to King Henry VIII of England, Joanna the Mad, to Philip the Handsome, heir to the Habsburg lands, whose son Charles V would inherit a vast empire. Earlier, in Anglo-Saxon England, the marriage of Bertha, a Frankish Christian princess, to Ethelbert, the pagan king of Kent, in the late 6th century, around 580 AD, had a subtle but profound impact. Bertha was the daughter of Charibert, the first king of Paris. As a condition of the marriage, she was allowed to practice her Christian faith freely in Kent. She brought her chaplain Leodhard with her, and was given the old Roman church of St. Martin's in Canterbury for her worship, while Ethelbert himself remained pagan for some time. Bertha's presence and practice of Christianity created a tolerant environment and a Christian foothold in his kingdom. This was crucial when Pope Gregory the Great sent Augustine on a mission to convert the Anglo-Saxons in 597 AD. Augustine landed in Kent, and Ethelbert, likely influenced by Bertha's example and perhaps her gentle persuasion, received him favorably. He allowed Augustine to preach and eventually converted to Christianity himself. This conversion of a major Anglo-Saxon king was a critical first step in the Christianization of England, which had enormous cultural, political, and social consequences for the development of the nation. Bertha's marriage and her quiet devotion directly facilitated this momentous religious and political shift. Number 3. Holy orders, worldly power, abbesses and visionaries. You might picture medieval nuns and holy women as secluded figures dedicated solely to prayer and contemplation. While spiritual devotion was central to their lives, some of these women, particularly powerful abbesses and respected visionaries, wielded significant indirect political influence. Abbesses of major convents often controlled vast estates, functioning like feudal lords. They managed resources, tenants, and even knights. Holy women, renowned for their piety or mystical visions, could command the attention of kings, emperors, and popes, their advice and admonitions carrying surprising weight in the often brutal world of medieval politics. Hildegard of Bingen, born in 1098 in what is now Germany, is a remarkable example. From a young age, she experienced religious visions, which she kept secret for many years. She became a Benedictine nun and eventually an abbess, founding her own monasteries at Rupertsberg and Ebingen. In her 40s, she received what she believed to be a divine command to write down her visions. With the support of influential churchmen and eventually Pope Eugenius III, she began to document them in works like Scivia's Know the Ways. Her fame as a prophetess and mystic spread throughout Europe. This spiritual authority gave Hildegard a platform to influence the powerful. She corresponded extensively with a wide range of people, from humble monks to popes, emperors, kings, and queens. Her letters were not just spiritual guidance. They often contained pointed political advice, criticisms of corruption, and calls for reform. She exhorted Emperor Frederick Barbarossa to humility and obedience to God, warned King Henry II of England about his conduct, and advised numerous bishops and archbishops. She didn't shy away from rebuking those she believed were abusing their power or straying from righteous paths. For example, she engaged in a prolonged dispute with the ecclesiastical authorities of Mainz, when they forbade her community from receiving sacraments because she had allowed an excommunicated nobleman to be buried in her monastery's cemetery. Arguing he had repented, she eventually won. Her influence stemmed not from any formal political office, but from the widespread belief in the divine source of her visions and her fearless articulation of what she perceived as God's will. Beyond her spiritual and political influence, she was also a gifted composer of music, a writer on natural history and medicine, and the inventor of an alternative alphabet. Another formidable abbess was Hilda of Whitby in 7th century Northumbria, in modern-day England. Born into Northumbrian royalty in 614, Hilda became the founding abbess of the monastery of Hartlepool, and later, around 657, established the renowned double monastery of Streneschalch, later known as Whitby Abbey. This monastery housed both monks and nuns, with Hilda as its head. Under her leadership, Whitby became a major center of learning and religious life. It was so highly regarded that, according to the historian Bede, 5 men from her monastery later became bishops. Kings and princes sought her counsel due to her wisdom and prudence. The most significant political event associated with Hilda's abbey was the Synod of Whitby in 664 AD. This synod was convened by King Oswiu of Northumbria to resolve critical differences between the Celtic Christian practices prevalent in Northumbria, derived from Iona, and the Roman Christian practices that were gaining ground, particularly regarding the dating of Easter and the style of monastic tonsure. These weren't just minor ritualistic points. They represented different lines of religious authority and cultural alignment. The decision would affect Northumbria's relationship with the rest of Anglo-Saxon, England, Ireland, and continental Europe. Hilda herself had been raised in the Celtic tradition and initially supported its customs. The synod was held at her abbey, indicating her standing and the importance of her institution. Although the synod ultimately decided in favor of the Roman practices, aligning Northumbria with Canterbury and Rome, Hilda accepted the decision for the sake of unity. Her role as host and her significant influence in the Northumbrian church meant her abbey was the chosen site for this pivotal decision, placing her at the heart of a debate with far-reaching political and ecclesiastical consequences for the English church. Further south, in the Frankish kingdoms, Radegund, c. 520–587 AD, offers an earlier example of a queen who transitioned into a powerful religious figure. A Thuringian princess, she was captured by the Frankish king Clotilde I, and later forced to marry him. Despite being queen, she lived an ascetic life, dedicating herself to charitable works. After Clotilde murdered her brother, Radegund fled the court and sought to dedicate her life to God. She was eventually consecrated as a deaconess and founded the Abbey of the Holy Cross in Poitiers, one of the first nunneries in Frankish Gaul. As Abbess Radegund became an influential figure, her abbey became a center of learning and culture, attracting women from noble families. She cultivated a friendship with the poet Venantius Fortunatus, who wrote extensively about her and her community. While she had renounced direct political involvement, she did not entirely escape it. She used her moral authority and her network of contacts to mediate in political disputes, particularly among the often warring Merovingian kings, who were her former husband's relatives. She also successfully petitioned the Byzantine Emperor Justin II to send a relic of the True Cross to her abbey, a significant diplomatic achievement that enhanced her monastery's prestige and spiritual importance. Her life shows how a woman could transform her royal status into spiritual authority, which in turn provided a different avenue for influencing the political and cultural landscape. These abbesses and holy women, through their administration of significant landholdings, their respected wisdom or their perceived divine connection, carved out unique niches of power in a male-dominated world. Number 2. Dear King, yours truly, a concerned noblewoman, the power of the pen and the network. While they might not have been signing treaties or commanding armies directly, many medieval women were skilled communicators and networkers. Literacy was not universal, but for women in noble or wealthy merchant families, or those in religious orders, the ability to read and write opened up avenues of influence. Through letters, they could manage estates from afar, petition rulers for favors or justice, offer advice solicited or not, share vital news, and maintain complex webs of family and political alliances. These written words, carefully crafted and strategically dispatched, could be potent tools. The Paston family letters from 15th century England provide an extraordinary glimpse into how gentry women used writing to navigate and influence their world. Margaret Paston, c. 1423 to 1484, in particular, emerges as a formidable figure. While her husband, John Paston, was often away in London, dealing with legal and political matters related to their contested landholdings and upward social mobility, Margaret managed their Norfolk estates. Her letters to him, and to her sons, reveal the immense range of her responsibilities and her shrewdness. She reported on the state of their properties, supervised farm work, collected rents, often a difficult task, hired and managed staff, and ordered supplies. More significantly, she was deeply involved in the family's numerous and often violent legal disputes over land. She organized the defense of their manors against armed attacks by rival claimants, such as the siege of Caister Castle. She corresponded with lawyers, sought support from influential local figures, and kept her husband informed of every development. Her letters are filled with requests for legal advice, updates on local gossip that might have political implications, and her own strong opinions on how to proceed. For example, she often urged her husband to be more assertive or to take specific legal actions. She also played a key role in arranging marriages for her children, negotiating terms and ensuring the alliances benefited the family's standing. While her influence was primarily local and familial, the Paston letters demonstrate how a literate woman could be the linchpin of a family's fortunes, using written communication to manage property, engage in legal battles, and maintain social networks, all of which were deeply intertwined with the local political power structures of the time. Her actions directly impacted her family's wealth and status, which in turn affected their influence in East Anglian society. Christine de Pizan, Cetera 1364, Citri 1430, operated on a more prominent international stage. Born in Venice, she moved to Paris as a child when her father became court astrologer to King Charles V of France. Well educated, she was widowed at 25, with 3 young children and a mother and niece to support. Unusually, for her time, she decided to support her family by becoming a professional writer, arguably the first woman in Europe to do so. She wrote prolifically on a wide range of subjects, including poetry, biographies, educational treatises for princes and princesses, and works on warfare and chivalry. Her writings were not just literary exercises. They often engaged directly or indirectly with the political issues of her day. France was embroiled in the 100 Years' War with England and suffering from internal divisions, particularly the conflict between the Armagnac and Burgundian factions during the madness of King Charles VI. Christine wrote works like The Book of the Body Politic and The Book of Peace, offering advice on good governance, the duties of rulers, and the importance of justice and peace. She dedicated these works to powerful patrons, including members of the French royal family and the Duke of Burgundy, hoping to influence their thinking and actions. Her most famous work, The Book of the City of Ladies, defended women against misogynistic attacks common in literature and argued for women's education and their contributions to society. While this was more of a cultural intervention, it had political undertones by challenging established social hierarchies. Christine also used her pen in more direct political ways. She wrote a laudatory biography of King Charles V, praising his wisdom and good rule, which served as an implicit model for his successors. In her later years, she wrote a poem celebrating Joan of Arc's victory at Orleans, recognizing its significance for the French cause. Through her extensive network of patrons and her widely circulated manuscripts, Christine de Pizan participated in the political discourse of her era, offering counsel, critique, and historical perspective. She used her literary talents to try and shape opinion and promote ideals of good kinship and peace at a time of great turmoil. Even earlier, women in less public roles used letters to maintain crucial family and political ties. Consider Aregund, a 6th century Frankish queen, one of the wives of King Clothar I. While her own letters don't survive in the same way as the Pastons, the discovery of her remarkably well-preserved grave in the Basilica of Saint Denis in 1959 provided insights into her status. What we do know from chroniclers like Gregory of Tours is that royal women were central to dynastic politics, The exchange of letters between royal courts, often facilitated by queens and noblewomen, was essential for diplomacy, for arranging marriages, and for conveying sensitive information. Queens could act as intermediaries between their birth families and their marital families, smoothing over disputes or fostering alliances. For example, Brunhilde of Austrasia, a Visigothic princess who married into the Merovingian dynasty, engaged in extensive correspondence with popes and Byzantine rulers, playing a complex and often controversial role in Frankish politics for decades. These networks of communication, maintained by literate women, or women with access to scribes, were vital threads in the complex tapestry of medieval power, allowing them to exert influence from behind the scenes. Number 1. My land, my rules. Sort of heiresses and landowners wielding clout. In a society where land equaled wealth and power, inheriting or controlling significant property could place medieval women in extraordinarily influential positions. While legal systems varied and often favored male inheritance, women could and did inherit estates, manors, and even entire counties or duchies, especially in the absence of male heirs. Managing these territories involved them in local governance, legal disputes, military obligations, and the complex feudal web of loyalties and rivalries. This economic power, derived from land, gave them leverage that could be translated into political influence, making them players, or at least very valuable pawns, in the games of kings and nobles. Countess Matilda of Tuscany, etc. 1046, 1115, is one of the most powerful examples of a female landowner who shaped European politics. She inherited vast territories in northern Italy, strategically located between the Papal States to the south and the Holy Roman Empire to the north. This made her a pivotal figure in the investiture controversy, the major power struggle between the papacy, led by Pope Gregory VII, and the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV, over who had the authority to appoint church officials. Matilda was a staunch supporter of the Gregorian reform movement and a close ally of Pope Gregory VII. Her lands became a crucial buffer and a base of support for the papacy. She commanded her own troops and actively participated in the military conflicts of the era. Her castles, like Canossa, became famous. It was at Canossa in the winter of 1077 that Emperor Henry IV, having been excommunicated by Pope Gregory VII, famously stood barefoot in the snow for 3 days, begging the Pope, who was a guest in Matilda's castle, for forgiveness. Matilda played a role as mediator in this iconic event, which was a major symbolic victory for papal authority, though the wider conflict continued. Matilda's military and financial support for Gregory VII and his successors was indispensable. She led armies against imperial forces, defended papal territories, and used her wealth to fund the reformist cause. She married twice, first to Godfrey the Hunchback, Duke of Lower Lorraine, and much later, at the Pope's urging for strategic reasons, to the much younger Welf V of Bavaria. Neither marriage was particularly successful personally, but had political dimensions. Upon her death, she bequeathed her extensive allodial, privately owned, lands to the papacy, a legacy that continued to be a source of conflict and papal claims for centuries. Matilda's control of strategically vital territories and her unwavering commitment to the papal cause allowed her to exert a level of political and military influence rarely seen by women in the medieval period. In England, Alice de Lacy, Countess of Lincoln and Salisbury, 1281 to 1348, demonstrates how a great heiress could become a central figure in the turbulent politics of the nobility. She was the daughter and sole heiress of Henry de Lacy, 3rd Earl of Lincoln, one of the closest advisors to King Edward I. Her inheritance was immense, including the earldoms of Lincoln and Salisbury and vast estates across England. This made her marriage a matter of high political importance. In 1294, she was married to Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, a cousin of King Edward II and one of the wealthiest and most powerful nobles in England. This marriage consolidated huge landholdings, making Lancaster even more influential and often a problematic rival to Edward II. Alice was at the center of baronial politics through her husband. Lancaster led the baronial opposition to Edward II, clashing with the king over royal favorites like Piers Gaveston and the Despensers. Alice's own life was dramatic. In 1317, she was abducted from her manor at Canford, Dorset, by retainers of John de Warenne, Earl of Surrey. This event was a major scandal and contributed to the escalating tensions and private warfare among the nobility. It was likely part of a wider plot to humiliate Lancaster and possibly to seize some of his, or rather her, lands. Lancaster accused Warenne and even implicated the king. Although Alice was recovered, the incident fueled Lancaster's animosity towards Edward II. Lancaster was eventually defeated and executed for treason in 1322 after the Battle of Boroughbridge. After Lancaster's death, Alice, as a wealthy widow with dower rights and her own substantial inheritance, remained a significant figure. She was forced by the king and his favorite, Hugh Despenser the Younger, to surrender some of her lands. She later married Eubulus Lestrange, and after his death, Hugh de Frayne. Throughout these tumultuous events, her control over the vast de Lacy inheritance was a constant factor in the power struggles of the English nobility. Her estates provided wealth and manpower, making her a prize to be controlled or an ally to be won. While she herself may not have directly dictated national policy, her status as a great heiress meant her marriages, her lands, and her very person were deeply enmeshed in the political intrigues and power plays of early 14th century England. Or wealth and titles were levers that others sought to control, and her own efforts to manage and retain her inheritance were inherently political acts.